There is a very real chance our children and grandchildren may one day choose to buy or even rent a car to live in instead of building a house. Yes, you heard that right. We used to believe that if you worked hard enough, Americans could have a home, a car, and a life of their own. That used to be the American dream. But today there are Americans who still put on their uniforms every morning, go to work, collect a paycheck, laugh, and talk like everything is normal. Then at night, they cover up their car windows and sleep behind the wheel. During the day, they are workers. At night, they no longer have a door they can call home. What is really happening in the country with the #1 GDP in the world? Today, join us as we expose some of the most shocking truths that millions of people do not know about the American middle class right now. Where are they? And could what is happening to them today be a warning of a darker America tomorrow? Watch until the end, because this is no longer just about a few homeless people. This is a warning that the biggest economic machine in the world is crushing its own innocent people. When you think about the American dream, you might picture a house in the suburbs, a lawn out front, and a garage for 2 cars. But to be honest, for a lot of people today, buying a house is not even the issue. They're just trying to afford an apartment. Sounds simple, right? Go to work, get paid, pay the rent. But even that simple arrangement is starting to fall apart.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any 2 bedrooms available.
Yes, ma'am. We have some ready for move-in as early as Monday.
All right, and how much do those go for?
$1,525 to $1,875,
How does it go from $1,500 to $1,800?
depending on the phase that you apply for.
Okay, so like the older ones and the newer ones.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, now I know that it's raised for everyone, but that's ridiculous. That is way too much. And they're just raising the prices around here to get as much basic housing allowance from the military as possible, because we're right outside the base, and it only used to be $1,300 here. So why is it?
You heard that number right. Another $500 a month, which comes out to $6,000 a year. The apartment did not get another room. Her income did not suddenly go up by $6,000. That is just the price she has to pay to keep a roof over her head. And what really matters is that she found out similar apartments had gotten more expensive too. So if prices are going up across the whole area, how realistic is it to say, if you do not like it, just move? But the next story is even harder to believe. This woman simply opened the renewal notice for the apartment she was already living in.
I got my lease renewal today sent to my email, and the numbers that were presented to me made my jaw fall to the ground. And not many things make my jaw fall to the ground quite like this. I live in Channelside, I live in Tampa, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So if I want to sign another 12-month long lease, which is the lease term I'm currently on, they are going to raise my rent over $1,000. Now, this is where I want to make sure everyone's sitting down for this number. If I want to go month...
Can you believe that someone without a home may have trouble getting into the rental market, but even someone who already has a place may not be able to afford to stay? Of course, 2 TikTok videos cannot represent all of America. But Harvard says that in 2024, 22.7 million renter households, or 49%, were spending more than 30% of their income on housing, while 12.1 million households were spending more than half. And just because rent growth has slowed down does not mean housing is affordable again. From 2014 to 2024, the United States lost about 9.3 million rental units priced below $1,400, while the number of units priced at $1,400 or more increased by 11.8 million. Now look at the woman living in her car with her 2 cats. According to her, the apartments she was looking at cost around $1,600, but many places required income equal to 3 times the rent, which means $4,800 a month. She does seasonal work, she does not have a guarantor, and her serving job does not give her income that looks stable enough on paper. And here is the vicious cycle to get housing. She needs a stable job, but to keep a stable job, she needs a stable place to live. So where do you even start? That is what makes this so troubling. Housing prices do not have to go up any further to keep causing pain. The prices we already have are enough to push a lot of working people out of the market. And once rent has eaten up almost all of your financial cushion, one unexpected bill can bring everything crashing down. And that same pressure is pushing more people out of apartments, into parking lots, and into their cars to live. It may sound like at least they still have a roof over their heads. But here's the scary part. The car that looks like the last way out could actually become the final trap. When people cannot afford rent anymore, many of them start doing what seems like the most logical thing. They leave the apartment and move into their car. At least they no longer have to hand over $1,600 or $2,000 every month to a landlord, right? I used to think the same thing. But hold on, what if that car is still a debt too? That is where the story takes a turn. You leave one home because you can no longer afford to keep paying to live there, then move into another home that still comes with a monthly payment, insurance, gas repairs, and a lender that has the right to repossess it if you stop paying. You think you escaped the landlord. Maybe you just traded the landlord for the bank. And living in a car is not free. Get kicked out of a parking lot at 3 in the morning, you have to drive somewhere else. Want to take a shower, drive to the gym, need to get to work, you still need gas. If the car breaks down, you do not just lose your transportation. Your bedroom just broke down too. But gas is not even the scariest part.
They just repossessed my Kia Telluride, so the $38,000 that I owe on it is no longer my issue. Financed my Kia at 16.99%, and who the fuck does that? It's finally starting to hit me that they came and repossessed my $55,000 Kia Telluride this week. When you have paid so much on a car loan and they just come and hook it up, but let's talk about it. You mean to tell me I haven't paid my car payment since December and they're just now coming to pick it up? I have had nothing but the worst experience with Kia.
Gas takes your money 1 gallon at a time. A car loan can take the roof over your head. Look at this woman's reaction when her Kia Telluride was repossessed. The strange part is not that they took the car, it is that she actually felt relieved. Can you believe that someone loses a car worth tens of thousands of dollars and actually feels set free? According to her, the Telluride was financed at 16.99% interest, and she still owed around $38,000 when it was repossessed. But there is another detail that a lot of people may miss. Just because the car is taken away does not mean every financial obligation automatically disappears. If the car is sold for less than what is still owed plus the related costs, the borrower may still owe the difference. The car is gone, the bill may still be there, and if that car was also where you slept, then your home just got repossessed. Now look at the bigger picture. In the second quarter of 2026, the average payment on a financed new car in the United States hit a record $777 a month. Nearly a quarter of borrowers stretched their loans to 84 months or longer. 7 years. Americans are not necessarily getting cheaper cars. They are stretching the debt out longer, so the monthly payment looks easier to handle. And in the story we already saw about the woman living in her car, the car payment alone was around $515 plus $250 for insurance, which already came to $765 a month before gas. She also said the car was at risk of being repossessed. And now I want to make an assumption. I want to emphasize this an assumption. If more and more people are forced to live in cars, what will the market see? A housing crisis or a new group of customers? Businesses do not have to create the crisis. They just have to learn how to sell things to the people trapped inside it. The things people living in cars put together themselves today, folding mattresses, window covers, batteries, storage, could easily be packaged tomorrow as a mobile living package added to a premium model and sold back to them at a higher price. And that is what worries me. Someone who no longer rents an apartment may still have to pay separately for every function that a home used to provide at one address: parking, electricity, internet, showers, storage, insurance, and the car loan. You are no longer paying one housing bill. You are just splitting it into a bunch of smaller bills. I'm not saying car companies are plotting to force Americans into cars. What is more troubling is that no conspiracy is needed at all. If every side simply maximizes its own benefit, the end result can still be that ordinary people own less and less. Today, they cannot afford to buy a house, so they live in a car. Tomorrow, if even the car becomes too expensive to own, the question may become, can we still afford to buy the last place we have left to sleep, or will we have to rent that too? Today, a lot of Americans have a very strange fear. They are afraid to go to the doctor. Not because American doctors are not good, not because hospitals lack technology, or because the American healthcare system cannot save lives. Quite the opposite. This is still a place with some of the most advanced doctors' medicines and equipment in the world. What gives a lot of people a headache sometimes is not the illness. It is the bill that shows up after the illness has already been treated. And I want to emphasize this. We are not talking about a few dozen dollars. One scan, one test, or one trip to the emergency room can leave a patient facing hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on the situation. You may know what is wrong with you within a few hours, but it may take a few weeks before you find out how much it is going to hurt your wallet. You know what makes this even harder to understand? Having insurance does not necessarily mean you are getting the lowest price. A study in JAMA Network Open looking at 70 hospital services found that cash prices at many hospitals could be lower than the negotiated prices for commercial insurance. That does not mean using insurance is always more expensive. Insurance plans, deductibles, networks, and individual services are all different. But it does show that there is a real contradiction here For the same service at the same hospital, you can see different prices depending on how you pay. And this is where I think an ordinary person has every right to be frustrated. You already pay an insurance premium every month, but when you actually need to use it, you still have to ask how much the deductible is, how much the copay is, how much the coinsurance is, whether the doctor is in network, whether the facility is in network, and then what price the insurance company negotiated. Are Americans going to the doctor or taking an accounting exam? The fact that CMS itself requires hospitals to publicly disclose both discounted cash prices and the prices negotiated with individual insurers shows that the pricing system really does have multiple layers. And do not forget, before workers even set foot inside a hospital, they already had to pay for insurance. In 2025, the average total premium for family coverage through an employer was nearly $27,000 a year, with workers paying an average of about $6,850 out of their wages. Insurance premiums went up 6% that year, while wage growth recorded by KFF was around 4%. Wages were not completely standing still, but look at real-life rent. The car insurance, food utilities, and then healthcare are all holding out their hands asking for more money, while your paycheck does not magically grow by a few $100s every month. Sometimes I wonder, do these companies really think Americans go to work because they are passionate about it? People go to work to pay for housing, raise their kids, keep the car running, and hopefully have a little left over for retirement. When costs rise faster than wages can absorb them, a medical bill does not have to be big enough to bankrupt you overnight. It just has to wipe out the savings you were counting on for next month. Then the car breaks down, rent comes due. The credit card balance starts climbing, and just like that, a health problem starts turning into a housing problem. That is the truly scary part. A hospital bill does not have to physically kick you out of your home. It only has to take away the money that was keeping you in that home. And in a country where people are already counting every month of rent, every car payment, and every gallon of gas, getting sick sometimes does not just attack the body. It attacks the last piece of financial stability holding a family together. There is a kind of change happening in a lot of American communities that you would barely notice if you were just driving through. The shop is still open, the sign is still hanging there, the worker is still wearing the shirt with the same logo you have seen for 10 years. But behind that door, the owner may no longer be the local family. And I think this is the part we really need to pay attention to. Because a town does not have to lose all of its businesses to lose its local economy. Sometimes the stores are still right there, but the ownership has quietly gone somewhere else. Take the roofing business, for example. Does not sound very exciting, right? Roofing, shingles, gutters, trucks, and people climbing ladders in the hot sun. But think about it for a second. If your roof is leaking, can you just decide not to buy the repair? No. If your air conditioner dies in the middle of July, can you wait until next year? No, and if you have a toothache, you definitely cannot say, I am out of money this month, so I will just keep hurting next month. That is exactly why these very ordinary industries are so attractive to big money. Not because they are flashy, but because customers can barely stop needing them. The model is not as complicated as Wall Street language often makes it sound. A fund with a lot of money buys a local company that is already doing well. Then it buys a few more companies. It keeps the names customers already know, but brings advertising, accounting, purchasing, supplies, and management under one system. Sounds reasonable, right? And sometimes it really does help. If the old owner wants to retire, there is a buyer. The new company gets more money to expand. But this is where I start getting uncomfortable. A local tradesman who wants to start his own company has to buy a truck, buy tools, pay workers, run ads, and hope there are enough customers next month. Meanwhile, the other side may be backed by millions, even billions of dollars in investment capital. They are both fixing the same roof, but they are not standing on the same financial ladder, and this does not stop with roofing. Dentistry is also seeing more and more practices move from a model where one dentist owns the practice to larger systems. I am not saying a dental office owned by a corporation is automatically bad. I am also not saying dentists are trying to sell you procedures you do not need. But I have one very simple question. When a dentist is expected to take care of patients and hit revenue targets at the same time, how is the patient supposed to know what is advice for their tooth and what is pressure from the sales numbers? And this is the consequence that worries me most. Americans used to have a pretty clear path. Learn and trade work for someone else for a few years, save money, then open your own business. You did not need to become Jeff Bezos. You just needed a truck, a set of tools, a few loyal customers, and enough nerve to put your own name on the front door. That was how a worker became an owner. But if small businesses have to compete more and more with enormous pools of capital, that door is going to get narrower. People may still have jobs, but they will have fewer chances to become the boss. And those are two completely different things. A paycheck helps you survive in a town. Ownership is what gives you a piece of that town. This is the part I keep thinking about. Homes are getting harder to own. Car loans are getting longer and longer. Now even small businesses are getting harder to reach. There does not need to be any secret conspiracy. Every side only has to make more money for itself, and the final result can still look the same. Americans work everywhere, but own less and less where they live. If you think that anywhere on Earth, as long as a country is wealthy, people must also face losing their homes and crawling into their cars to sleep the way they do, in America, you would be wrong. Housing is expensive in Japan, Europe has inflation, Finland has poor people and homeless people too. Nowhere is paradise. But what I care about is this: when someone starts falling, how far do they fall before the system catches them? Look at the United States first. According to HUD, during a one-night count in January 2025, the United States had about 745,652 people experiencing homelessness. More than 266,000 of them were not staying in shelters. And under HUD's definition, people sleeping in cars, trucks, or vans because they do not have a fixed place to live are also considered unsheltered homeless. I want you to remember one thing. This is not the number of people who struggled at some point during the year. This is a snapshot of one night. Now let us go to Japan. The official survey from January 2026 counted 2,481 visibly homeless people across the entire country. It is very easy to hear that and shout, America has more than 700,000, Japan has just over 2,000. But I'm not going to do that because the two countries do not count the same way. Japan mainly counts people who regularly live in parks, train stations, along rivers, and in other public spaces. People sleeping in internet cafes, staying temporarily with others, or living in other unstable housing situations may not be fully captured in that number. But that is exactly what makes me even more curious. Japan does not only have people sleeping on the street, it also has a layer of hidden homelessness. However, their system includes programs that help with rent for people who lose their jobs or see their income drop, along with job search support, financial management, and temporary housing for people who do not have a stable place to live. Put simply, they try to catch some people before a suitcase and the backseat of a car become their new address. Then there is Finland. The way they think about it is even more different. Their housing first model starts with an idea that sounds so simple it is almost hard to believe. If you want someone to stop being homeless first, give them a stable place to live, then deal with employment, mental health addiction, or other problems. They do not make people fix their whole life before they can get a key. OECD has noted that this approach became central to Finland's strategy for reducing homelessness. And it is not magic. Finland reduced homelessness sharply over many decades, but in 2025, the number of homeless people living alone rose again to 4,579, partly in the context of higher living costs, unemployment, and growing difficulty paying rent. I like this detail because it destroys the fairy tale right away. No country can beat the math forever. But here is what I cannot ignore. America has some of the richest companies in the world, some of the most advanced hospitals and houses so big they have rooms just for storing stuff. So why can someone still work a full shift during the day and then spend the night looking for a parking lot hidden enough to sleep in? Maybe the problem is not that Americans do not work hard enough. Maybe the problem is that in America, too many people only discover that their last safety net has four wheels. And that is what I want us to remember. Living in a car is not some natural law of a modern economy. It is the result of choices about housing the safety net and the point when a society decides to help people before they lose their home or after they have already ended up in a parking lot. We just talked about how in America, the car is becoming the last safety net for people who can no longer hold on to an apartment. But the more I look at the numbers right now, the more I see an even more uncomfortable question: what happens if one day even that last safety net becomes too expensive to own? Today we see people who cannot afford a home move into a car. But if the car starts going down the same road as housing, higher prices, longer debt, heavier ownership costs, then where do people go if they have no home and no car? In June of 2026, the average transaction price of a new vehicle in the United States was about $49,758. I know that is the average. You can still find models around $30,000. But the problem is that in most of America, a car is not some luxury item you show off on the weekend. For millions of people, it is what gets them to work, the grocery store, school, and the hospital. Cox Automotive estimated that a household earning the median income would need the equivalent of more than 35 weeks of income to buy the average new vehicle. Do not have enough money? There is one way to make the car look more affordable. Do not make it cheaper, just stretch the debt out longer. In the second quarter of 2026, Edmunds said the average new car payment hit a record $777 a month. Nearly 24% of borrowers stretched their loans to 84 months or longer. 7 years. The car did not get 1 cent cheaper. The day you finally finished paying it off just got pushed farther away. Maybe you're thinking, then buy a used car. I would think the same thing. But in June, the average listing price for a used car was already about $27,027, up 6% from a year earlier. Even more importantly, vehicles priced under $15,000, exactly the kind people who are short on money need most, had significantly lower supply than the overall market. The people who need the cheapest cars have the hardest time finding them. And buying the car is still not the end of it. A estimated that in 2025, the average cost to own and operate a new vehicle was about $11,577 a year, including depreciation, financing, fuel insurance, registration, and maintenance under its research assumptions. In other words, the price on the windshield is just the ticket to get in. After that, a whole line of new bills starts walking through the door. Now, I want to take this one step further, and I want to emphasize this. This is a warning, not a prediction that this will definitely happen. Homes get too expensive, so people rent. Rent gets too expensive, so some people live in cars. Cars get too expensive, so people stretch loans to 6 years, 7 years. But what happens if they cannot even afford the loan? At that point, what is left may not be ownership. It may only be the right to use something. Imagine a market where you do not buy the car you sleep in. You pay every month just to keep using it. Maybe you also pay for insurance, parking, charging, internet, and storage. Sound familiar? You just turned the car into a rental apartment with 4 wheels. I'm not saying Detroit is holding secret meetings to create that future. In fact, I think it is even more troubling if nobody has to plan it. Car companies want profits, banks want interest, insurance companies price risk. People just want to keep going to work. Every individual decision can sound perfectly reasonable, but add them all together and ordinary people may still end up owning less and less. The American dream used to mean a house and a car out front. What I'm afraid of is that we are moving toward an economy where people do not own the house, do not own the car, but still have to pay for both every month. Looking back at this whole story, I think the scariest part is not that some Americans are sleeping in their cars. The scariest part is that we are slowly starting to treat it like something normal. Someone still goes to work, still pays taxes, still tries to pay the bills, but cannot hold on to an apartment. They move into the car to live. Then the car also becomes a debt that can be taken away. Meanwhile, housing, healthcare, insurance, and almost every other basic necessity keep asking for more money. I do not think the American dream was ever supposed to mean working your whole life just to rent the right to use everything around you. A home, a car, a small business. Those used to be the things that helped a family build independence. And if the next generation can no longer own those things, the question is not just whether they are poor or rich. The question is, after all those years of work, what actually belongs to them.